Ring the bell.
Wherever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whoever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you love, we welcome you.
Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Toledo, Ohio. Thank you for joining us today, March 22nd, 2020. During this unusual and extraordinary time in history, we need to maintain our physical distance from each other, but we also need to sustain our personal and social and spiritual connections. So this live streaming approach to Sunday worship is our attempt to do that, and it is a work in progress. We are learning as we go, and we invite you to comment in the chat box. I have a few announcements for this morning. The most important being that our church building is closed for the time being. Office hours have been suspended. The church staff are working from home as much as possible. They are checking office messages periodically. Reverend Tim is still accessible via email, Facebook, and telephone. Committees are not meeting at the church, but if meetings are an important part of your spiritual practice, you can still meet via Zoom, Skype, or other electronic means. Our church communications will continue, including the UU-FYI that we send out via email, the webpage, which is uutoledo.org, and Facebook. And now that we are live streaming, you have a YouTube channel, which apparently you have found already. But if you forgot how you ended up here, just type Toledo Unitarians in the YouTube search box.
And I want to extend special thanks to musician Hal Walker, who is the composer of the opening song that we give every week for our processional, Whoever You Are. Thank you, Hal, once again, for letting us use your music. Our opening words today, the Persian poet Rumi challenges us. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. And we come from rich heritages of liturgy and pomp. We come from burning legacies of angry gods and threats of hellfire. We come just as we are. We come with exuberant and joyful hearts, eager to witness to others. We come bereft of the goodness of life, wondering, hesitant. We come just as we are. We come in the bloom of youth, ready to explore new truths. We come parents and children to be nourished for an hour. We come with gray in our hair and experiences to share. We come just as we are. We come to the place we never knew before was home. We come to the place, to this screen, to this virtual gathering that has been home for most of our lives. We come just as we are to join our siblings as members of one family in this beloved home, our hands and hearts outstretched. Come yet again Come. And that was written by Ann Slater.
As Reverend Tim lights our chalice this morning, I'll read this writing from Rumi, a Persian poet. Only breath. Not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Zen, not any religion or cultural system. I am not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I do not exist, and not an entity in this world or the next. Did not descend from Adam and Eve or any origin story. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, have seen the two worlds as one, and that one call to and know. First, last, outer, inner. Only that breath, breathing human being.
And now please join me in reciting the covenant, which we usually say is printed in our order of service. And most of you did have the opportunity to download that order of service if you don't have this memorized, but we have words behind us as well. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now our opening song from our Unitarian Universalist hymnal is number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. And we will sing 3 verses, and our music director, Mickey Miller, will be our main voice for this. With Bonnie Rowe playing piano.
Hi. For today's story, so I was trying to think of things that you're going through at home, and so I thought about maybe doing something about being greedy or unable to share, because some of our kids may be struggling with that at home. But if you adults may notice that there's also a larger theme, and you may see similarities to our leaders today in my story. So today's story is from Healing Stories for Challenging Behavior by Susan Farrow. It's about being greedy or unable to share. It's called Garden of Light, an Environmental Storytell. The Garden of Light was written for World Environmental Day in 1992 and later produced as a one-hour musical play by Homegrown Productions, Byron Bay. There was once a beautiful garden that stretched far and wide, from the valleys to the plains, from the hills to the seaside. In this beautiful garden grew every flower, every plant, every tree. In this beautiful garden lived every bird, every butterfly, every bee. In this beautiful garden, all the children of the land loved to play, and the garden kept them healthy and happy in their play every day. In the center of this garden, at the top of the tallest hill, was a great shining golden ball. The golden ball shone so bright, it filled the garden with springtime light. At the foot of the hill lived the caretaker of the golden ball. She was a nature weaver, and it was her task to polish the ball and keep it shining bright. She lived in a room with a round weaving basket and a weaving loom. Every day she would take her round basket into the garden, fill it with fresh grasses, flowers, and leaves. Then, on her weaving loom, she would weave a soft nature cloth. With this soft nature cloth, she would climb to the top of the hill and polish the golden ball so bright until it filled the garden with glorious springtime light. For a long time, all was happy and well, and the golden ball needed the garden, and the garden needed the golden ball. And the children enjoyed somewhere beautiful to play. But one day, a new king took over the land. This new king was called King Didn't Care. And King didn't care about anything except himself. King didn't care about flowers and plants and trees. King didn't care about the birds and butterflies and bees. King didn't care if the children had anywhere beautiful to play. King didn't care, only cared about what he liked. And King didn't care, only liked collecting and storing treasures. So, as soon as King Didn't Care took over the land, he ordered his workmen to start digging treasure mines and building castles to store treasures in. And slowly, very slowly, the beautiful garden was chopped down to make way for treasure mines and treasure castles. As the garden grew smaller and smaller, the nature weaver found it harder and harder to fill her round basket with fresh flowers and grasses and leaves. She found it harder and harder to weave a soft nature cloth on her weaving loom. She found it harder and harder to polish the golden ball bright, and slowly the golden ball stopped shining its glorious springtime light. Slowly, the golden ball started to turn a tarnished gray, the gray of the clouds on a dark, stormy day. Soon, all the beautiful garden was gone. There were no more flowers and plants and trees. There were no more birds and butterflies and bees. There was nowhere beautiful for the children to play. All that was left at the top of the tallest hill was a great, gray, tarnished ball. In the room at the foot of the hill sat the nature weaver with an empty weaving basket and an empty weaving loom. The land around was now barren and brown. It was filled with holes where treasure mines had been dug and covered with castles to store treasures in. Many years passed. The garden was forgotten and the children grew used to having nowhere beautiful to play. King didn't care that the beautiful garden was gone. He visited his castles and was kept happy counting his treasures. But one day, he happened to look out a castle window and see the hill of the gray, tarnished ball. What a terrible sight, he said to himself. That gray tarnished ball I must try to hide. It makes me feel sort of uncomfortable inside. King didn't care, then ordered his workmen to build a high stone wall around the hill of the gray tarnished ball. The high stone wall had no windows and no doors. No one could get in to see the gray tarnished ball, and the nature weaver couldn't get out. She stayed sitting in her room with her empty weaving basket and her empty weaving loom. On the morning after the wall was finished, King Didn't Care woke up feeling quite ill. When he looked in the mirror, he saw that he had turned quite gray, the gray of the clouds on a dark, stormy day. The doctors in the land were called to his bedside. They had never seen such illness before, and no matter what remedy they tried, nothing seemed to help. In fact, King Didn't Care was growing grayer by the day, and his illness became so severe that he didn't survive to see the springtime of that year. On the day that King Didn't Care died, cracks started to appear in the high stone wall. These cracks in the wall were very small, but playing just near the wall was a child, also very small. The child found she was able to fit through one of the cracks, and once inside, she stood looking up at the hill and the great gray tarnished ball. She then saw the room at the foot of the hill and walked up to it and peered inside. Sitting in the room was the nature weaver with her empty weaving basket and empty weaving loom. The nature weaver smiled, a tired but friendly smile. "I hope you've come in time," she said. Beckoning a little child to come inside, she told the story of the beautiful garden that once stretched over the land, of the flowers and plants and trees, of the birds and butterflies and bees. She told of her basket that she used to fill with fresh flowers and grasses and leaves. She told of her weaving loom and the soft nature cloth she used to weave. She told of her task to polish the golden ball and keep it shining bright so that it would fill the garden with springtime light. The little child's eyes grew wide with wonder. "We must bring back the garden. We must bring back the golden shine to the great gray tarnished ball," she cried. "Well," the nature weaver sighed, "there's only one way to do this, but I am too old to do it by myself. I need your help and the help of all the other children of the land. You must be prepared to work very hard. Go back through a crack in the wall and gather up all the children you can find. Then I will tell you what you need to do. I hope you've come in time. I do hope you've come in time." The little child slipped back through a crack in the wall and gathered up as many children as she could find. They followed her back to the nature weaver's room, where they all sat to watch and listen. The nature weaver took out a small box and held it for the children to see. "These are my treasures," she said. "I gathered them from the garden before it was chopped down." Then she opened the lid of the box and the children saw thousands of tiny seeds inside. "With your help and much hard work, we can plant these seeds and bring back the garden. Then I will be able to weave a new nature cloth with this cloth. We will be able to bring back the shine to the great gray tarnished ball." The nature weaver showed the children how to dig the ground and plant the seeds, how to water and tend the new plants with loving care. Every day, the children would come back through the cracks in the wall and work in the garden at the foot of the hill of the gray tarnished ball. When the garden had grown high enough, the nature weaver gave the children her round weaving basket to fill with fresh grasses and flowers and leaves. She then sat at her weaving loom, and once more she was able to weave a soft nature cloth. The children then took the soft nature cloth to the top of the hill and started to polish the gray tarnished ball. This took a very long time. For many days, the children came back through the crack in the wall and polished the gray tarnished ball. And slowly, it took a very long time, the children were able to bring back the golden shine. The great ball once again started to shine so bright. It filled the garden at the foot of the hill with golden springtime light. The children kept polishing and polishing the golden ball until one day its golden light shone so brightly against the high stone wall that it caused the high stone wall to fall. The golden light then flooded out over the land, and the beautiful garden was once more able to stretch far and wide, from the valleys and the plains, from the hills to the seaside. And once more, as before, the children had somewhere beautiful to play.
Thank you, Kristen. When we have a congregation here, live and in person, normally we ask the kids to come up front and Kristen tells the story there, and then we sing them out to their religious education classes. And normally we use the tune, "This Little Light of Mine," when we sing them out, but we have changed the tune a little bit during these times of COVID-19. And we tried this a couple of weeks ago. And since we're using the Rumi verse, "Come, come, whoever you are," this is something that a Unitarian Universalist musician adapted. Let's sing "Wash, Wash, Whoever You Are."
Wash, wash, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of cleaning, rinsing the germs off is easy to do. Wash it and wash.
Thank you. And then we have our congregational greeting, which these days is not something that we turn to one another and shake hands and perhaps honor the members of our congregation who like to hug. We need to keep physical distance, and please be very conscious of that as you go through your days. But we will give a moment. We have a chat going along with the live cast, and if you want to sign in on the chat, we have a general question. In this time of keeping space between one another, what instances of compassion have you witnessed? So that might be something that you enter as you are watching the service as well and participating by live stream. And with that, we turn to our anthem. Mickey.
Hi, folks. I wanted to bring a hymn, How Can I Keep From Singing? It's one that we've done before, and I know that some of the choir has asked we talk about things before we have an anthem. So just to read the first verse. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? keep from singing when tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near? How can I keep from singing to prison cell and dungeon file? Our thoughts to them are winging when friends by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing?
Thank you, Mickey. Please join me for a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. We think, especially these days, of the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on people and the state of the world, of those we know who are, and from what we read, many who will be infected, and of the caregivers who cannot isolate and must confront the disease rather than try to avoid it. Yes, the world again has turned upside down. With a theme of Islam in today's service, for our meditation time, I bring a reflection from a chaplain in the United States Army, Major George A. Tiger, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. This comes from his time in Afghanistan. It's called Towers of Babel. I have purchased a set of Islamic prayer beads from one of our local shop owners. The set has 99 beads, one for each of the names of God in Islam. These are not literally God's names, as if we can call God Joe or Bob, but the attributes Muslims ascribe to the holy, including the merciful, the shaper, the sustainer, the loving one. In the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, the people hoped to reach God and make their name famous, as if God were a thing to be used for their own vanity. As a result, the people of the world were scattered into diverse cultures and languages, presumably each with its own understanding of God. In part, this reflects the pre-scientific worldview in which God exists somewhere above us. The people thought they could stand face to face with God just by erecting a tall enough building. But the story is also about the human need to own and control things. When so much is out of our control, the lessons of Babel are important for all of us. We can all build towers of Babel when we use God for our own purposes. We can use God to dismiss others, to assert our superiority, to divide people into those who belong and those who don't. If we think God is a thing in a place, like the citizens of Babel did, we tend to decide that God is with us and not them. That is why I like the Islamic notion of 99 names of God. Each of those names is a reminder that God is a reality woven into the very fabric of being. God cannot be named or held or possessed, but must ultimately be experienced as love, justice, mercy, peace, compassion, creator, and more. What names might you find for God? To put it another way, where have you experienced the holy in your life, even here in this place? If you believe or even don't believe in God, but know that there is a God in story. When does God feel far away? How has the divine been close to you? These questions can tear down the towers of Babel in our minds and bring us down to earth, where God lives every day. And now, let's observe 1 minute of silence.
Today's reading is by Rumi, is entitled The Far Mosque. The place that Solomon made to worship in, called the Far Mosque, is not built of earth and water and stone, but of intention and wisdom and mystical conversation and compassionate action. Every part of it is intelligence and responsive to every other. The carpet bows to the broom, the door knocker and the door swing together like musicians. This heart sanctuary does exist, but it can't be described. Why try? Solomon goes there every morning and gives guidance with words, with musical harmonies, and in actions, which are the deepest teaching. A prince is just a conceit until he does something with generosity.
Last Sunday, our first live stream, I talked about the pandemic, the coronavirus, COVID-19's turning the world upside down. In my current Sunday planning, which of course is fluid and fluid with the state of things, I'll speak on matters of health again on May 3rd and May 24th. For now, I'm trying to do what I said last week, that we would try to keep the sermon topics that are already on the schedule as best we can, providing some sense of normalness within the extraordinary of moving our services to YouTube while we self-isolate at our homes. Next week, I'll return to the series of Jesus sermons I'm giving about once a month from my humanist perspective, with this one looking at the times the story has Jesus actually dead, from Friday crucifixion to his Sunday return from death. The health of our congregation, our city, our nation, and planet are of extreme importance and concern right now. But we also can have some attention to spirituality, to matters of religion, to community in that way, our own community and our multi-faith community, and be reminded of the breadth, the scope, the human connection of our Unitarian Universalist movement. So with this sermon, Muhammad's Night Journey, I'm speaking about a story celebrated today in Islam. This is the 27th day of the month Rajab, according to the Muslim calendar. Laylat al-Miraj, or Isra wal-Miraj, is the holiday for this story, which has two parts. Isra, about Muhammad, peace be upon him, going from Mecca to Jerusalem, and Miraj, his ascent to heaven, then a return back to Jerusalem and Mecca. Please forgive my likely mispronunciation of Arabic words in my speaking today. In Islam, Muhammad is said to be the final prophet and is said to have received the Quran as divine message to record and deliver to the people. This particular story is of Muhammad's one-night journey from Mecca to the Far Mosque, said by some to be the site of what is now the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem at the Dome of the Rock. And from there, the story describes Muhammad's ascent to the 7 levels of heaven and his meeting Allah, and then Muhammad's return to Mecca, all of this occurring in one night. Many religions have uplifting and even entertaining stories from their faith. From our heritage as Unitarian Universalists, we have read and heard many from the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. We know a few sutras that tell stories of the Buddha. There's even the story of the Universalist miracle, which I have told before, of farmer Thomas Potter building a chapel for the preaching of the Universalist faith, not yet present in America, in Good Luck, New Jersey, about 1760. And Universalist minister John Murray being on the ship the Hand in Hand, which gets stuck on a sandbar near Potter's Place in 1770. And Murray finally agrees to preach there. And when he's done, Universalism has come to the colonies and the ship can sail again. Today, I bring a story from Islam, the Muslim faith. I want to make it clear that I don't speak from deep knowledge, but rather as a Unitarian Universalist who gives respect to world religions and who wants people to hear this sacred story. One of the 6 sources of our Unitarian Universalist living tradition is wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. So let this be inspirational. This is a story mentioned in the Quran and detailed in Hadith, in stories about the Muslims' Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I tell it to this viewing congregation, and I ask you, if you want better knowledge, to seek out Islamic sources, for this is an important miracle of the Muslims' faith. I hope my respect for Islam is seen, though some of what I say might not be embraced by faithful Muslims, and since I combine different tellings of the story, people won't agree with all of the content. Let me tell you the story as I've adapted it from several sources, including the Quran and Hadith about Muhammad's life, but also drawn from a number of articles and postings from the internet. Because there are different versions, I will give a few variations, for like many sacred stories, there is more than one telling, and people give it differently. I ask you to believe it as you believe stories, to be inspired, for stories often have more truth than fact, especially when there are many tellings, and inspiration is essential to our living and being. We Unitarian Universalists, we humans, live in stories our whole lives, don't we? And this one should be among those we think about. For this story, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is near the sacred Kaaba in Mecca, the black structure said to be built by Abraham that today you see Muslims circling when they're on Hajj or pilgrimage. It's about the year 621 in our Western Common Era counting. In the past year, his wife had died and an uncle had died too. And the people in Mecca would make fun of Muhammad and his religion that at that time was unusual. So Muhammad would go to the Kaaba, a place of comfort for him, to honor Allah and to pray. So Muhammad is not at his home this night, and he feels tired pretty suddenly. And he takes the opportunity to sleep while he's at the Kaaba. It takes 3 shakes to wake him up, or some say it was nudging Muhammad's foot 3 times. Does he really wake up, or is it a dream? Does that matter when we're hearing a sacred story? Here's what happens. The archangel Gabriel, called Jabril, is the one who wakes him, and he wants Muhammad's attention. Muhammad knows the archangel Gabriel because it is that angel who much earlier told him to recite the revelations that would become the Quran, the Islamic holy book. And it was Gabriel who let Muhammad know that Muhammad was a messenger of Allah. Some of you Christians might know from holy stories that it's Gabriel who had told Mary that she was pregnant with Jesus. Some versions of this night journey story place the archangel Michael with Gabriel this night at the Kaaba and say that the two of them actually open Muhammad's chest, take his heart out, and purify it, removing doubt, error, idolatry, and paganism, and using a golden vessel, put in belief and wisdom, then replace his heart for this night journey. Or in a version without Michael, Gabriel fills Muhammad's heart with Zamzam water, holy water from a Mecca well, in this purification. When Muhammad is awake, Gabriel takes him by the arm, and they go to the mosque where Barak, a steed smaller than a mule, but bigger than a donkey, white with long ears and wings, and which could move so fast that each step reaches the horizon, is waiting to carry Muhammad. Barak is said to be a divine horse of the prophets. Sometimes Barak is portrayed with a peacock tail, a leopard coat, wings of many colors, and wearing a jeweled crown. That made a fast trip for Gabriel and Muhammad from the great mosque in Mecca, the near mosque, to the far mosque in Jerusalem, from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. There were stops along that trip too, to pray on the way. Medina, where Muhammad would move about a year later. Mount Sinai, an important biblical site where Moses received the Ten Commandments from Allah. Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. And Moses' gravesite, not known now in exact location, but where scripture says he could see the promised land of Israel. In Jerusalem, Barak gets tethered to the Temple Mount, and at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Muhammad greets all the prophets of Allah, 124,000 in number, who lived before him, including Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. And Muhammad leads all the prophets in prayer. Muhammad's leading showed the respect for him, the high status in the eyes of Allah. And with all the prophets there before him, it showed the universality of Islam being for all the prophets. After that prayer, 2 bowls are brought to Muhammad. One has milk, the other wine. He is asked to drink from one, and he chooses milk. Gabriel says he chose what is pure, so Gabriel takes Muhammad on a farther journey, no longer on land, but up from the Dome of the Rock, flying, but some versions leave Barak in Jerusalem and have Muhammad climbing a jeweled ladder. Either way, he's making an ascension from Jerusalem, a sacred city connected in this mystical way to heaven, or what is described as the 7 heavens or the 7 levels of heaven, separated by hidden steps of silver and gold, each level getting closer to the ultimate, to the home of Allah, and each one having a different prophet in it, starting with Adam, which stories say is the first human created by Allah. Adam is in the first heaven. Jesus and John the Baptist are in the second heaven. Joseph, the Joseph with the multicolored coat of the Israeli slaves in Egypt story, is in the third heaven. Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, who had the ark, is in the fourth heaven, and Muhammad meets Noah in heaven too. Aaron, Moses' brother, who helped Moses to free the Israeli slaves and make their exodus to the promised land, is in the fifth heaven, and Moses himself is in the sixth heaven. And finally, in seventh heaven, there is Abraham, whom God had promised would have descendants as numerous as the grains of sand, and who the story says was the ancestral father of the Hebrews through Sarah and of the Muslims through Hagar. Barak finally stops at the foot of a tree called a lot tree, kind of like lotus, isn't it? At the end of the seventh heaven. The tree has leaves the size of elephant ears and fruit as big as a heavy vase or a jug. And it's the tree of the end of all knowledge. It's by 2 hidden rivers of paradise and the Nile and Euphrates rivers. And nothing but Allah is beyond it. 70,000 angels a day are said to pray there. Some stories also place a celestial rooster there, others a many-headed angel. A bright light shone on the tree, and Muhammad focused on the tree, saying that he took refuge in Allah's light. Stories also say that Muhammad was allowed to venture beyond there to where no one but Allah had ever been. And though Muhammad was in the seventh heaven, Allah also showed Muhammad the depths of hell, with suffering people enduring different punishments related to the earthly sins they committed. There are versions that have Muhammad seeing his parents in hell too. Muhammad also saw people's delight in heaven, it said. While in Allah's presence, Muhammad is given instructions to take back to his people on how to observe salat, daily prayers. And Allah tells him that he wants the Islamic people to pray 50 times a day. When he leaves that ultimate place, Muhammad goes back through the seven heavens. In the sixth heaven, he tells Moses about the command to pray 50 times a day. And Moses thinks that is a lot and suggests that Muhammad return to Allah and request a lower number, lightening the heavy load. Muhammad does that, and he makes the circuit between Moses and Allah several times, a few times at least, until Allah agrees to 5 times a day, each of the 5 times representing 10 prayers. So the faithful would be credited with praying 50 times a day. Muhammad then returned to Jerusalem, and Barak took him back to Mecca. It said that Muhammad saw caravans on the road during his return, and that helped people to believe the story of Muhammad's night journey, as he told people at the mosque the next morning what happened to him in the night, about this journey to remember. But there were also skeptics who said that couldn't have happened. There still are, aren't there? But there are religious leaders and scholars who see the importance of the report and its part in building the Muslim faith. Muhammad's night journey is one of 2 things that are said to be divine truths given to Muhammad. The other one being the Quran, that was recited to him over the space of about 20 years, the stories say, and that he memorized and told others. Though many accused Muhammad of lying, of making up the story of his night journey, and that the Quran he recited did not come from Allah, people who saw Muhammad's honesty said that if he said it, it was true. And Islam grew into a world religion based on words spoken by Muhammad. Today, we understand that stories have many roles, and there are important parts of this story in recognizing the prophethood of Muhammad. I read that in Islam, what is written in the Quran must be true, but if you don't believe everything about other stories, even sacred ones, the parts that are not from the Quran don't mean you're apart from Islam. There are only brief entries about Muhammad's night journey in the Quran, the holy book of Islam. In Surah 17:1, Allah is quoted, "Glory be to him who carried his servant by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, whose precincts we have blessed, that we might show him some of our signs. Truly he is the hearer, the seer." And in Surah 53, 1 through 18, Muhammad's ascent has a reference. By the star when it sets, your companion has neither strayed nor erred, nor does he speak out of caprice. It is not but a revelation revealed, taught him by one of awesome power. Possessed of vigor, he stood upright when he was upon the highest heaven, the highest horizon. Then he drew nigh and came close till he was within 2 bows' length or nearer. Then he revealed to his servant what he revealed. The heart lied not in what it saw. Do you then dispute with him as to what he saw? And indeed he saw him another time at the lote tree of the boundary, by which lies the garden of the refuge, when there covered the lote tree that which covered. The gaze swerved not, nor did it transgress. Indeed, he saw the greatest signs of his Lord. May we hear and read stories of the faithful and from the faithful, our faith and others' faiths, stories from many people around the world, stories truly factual and stories greatly embellished. May we sit in the circle of this globe, this planet, and share our lives and words. So be it.
Thank you, Reverend Tim. At this time, we'd like to share together song number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Please sing or hum along. Coronavirus has upended our normal lives. It seems that every day there's a bit of unsettling news. And it is in these times that we need places like this church to remind ourselves that there is still hope, there is still love, and there is still community. This community is a refuge where we can keep the ember of hope alive. Our offerings each week sustain this community so we can share our small embers to light a dark world. Please give generously so that we can all together spread that light. You may go to our website, uutoledo.org, and click on the donate button below the photo of the church. And if you're feeling generous as well as hip, you can just smash that donate button. please join me in the dedication of the offering? We dedicate this offering to the support and good work of First Unitarian Church of Toledo in this community and in the world.
For the time being, we're planning to keep the topics we plan for upcoming Sunday services, but to offer them only by live stream on our YouTube channel, Toledo Unitarians. We want to have the 10 o'clock spiritual adventures time too. That's what we call adult religious education. But we have to change some topics there, as dialogues won't work in our present live stream setup. So that's in a little bit of flux, but we do have programs in the works. So for next week, we'll have something at 10 for spiritual adventures, the 10:30 religious education time. Then the 11 o'clock service, we have Friday noon to Sunday dawn, Jesus' death. Join us then.
And while we won't have our regular coffee hour today, Reverend Tim has suggested that we keep the camera on for a couple minutes for our social time. We hope you'll join us next week. And in the meantime, we welcome comments on this page or by email or other contacts.
Closing words.
Closing words.
This is from Enough Words by Ruby. How does a part of the world leave the world? How can wetness leave water? Don't try to put out a fire by throwing on more fire. Don't wash a wound with blood. No matter how fast you run, your shadow more than keeps up. Sometimes it's in front. Only full overhead sun diminishes your shadow. But that shadow has been serving you. What hurts you blesses you. Darkness is your candle. Your boundaries are your quest. I can explain this, but it would break the glass cover on your heart, and there's no fixing that. You must have shadow and light source both. Are these enough words, or shall I squeeze more juice from this? Who am I, my friend?
As Reverend Tim extinguishes the chalice, I'll share these words from Rumi. Which is worth more, a crowd of thousands or your own genuine solitude? Freedom or power over an entire nation? A little while alone in your room will prove more valuable than anything else that could ever be given you.
Now it's time for our recessional, then a brief time of coffee, and we will acknowledge the participants. They will come out here. We will not share a group hug, but we do want you to at least see Bonnie Rowe, who has been behind the scenes playing piano. So after she completes the recessional, come say hello and share some coffee with us and do some final words on the chat.
For the recessional, actually, let's go ahead and sing 118. Everybody just do one verse of this little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Coffee hour. And here's Bonnie.
Hey, everybody. I have to tell you what that offertory piece was. As you might have recognized, it's Let Freedom Span Both East and West, which is in our hymnal. It wasn't really listed anywhere. But that arrangement was written by a UU composer and pianist named Cliff Hardin. And I have to thank Gladys Rudolph for giving me that music. She gave me some of her music after she retired. Thank you, Gladys. I hope you're watching this. And in fact, thanks to her, I was even able to meet Cliff Hardin, who's a UU pianist and composer and I meet him at these conferences. So thank you, Cliff. And I have to say hi to Addison, because she is a young girl who complained to her father and mother that she didn't see me on this video last week. So she's the reason I'm standing before you. Thank you, Addison. Hi.
And while we're giving thanks, I want to thank the other people who this morning have helped to arrange this service. Of course, David Strickler, Mickey Miller, and Bonnie, and Kristen Olson. And earlier we had Bonnie Olson giving religious education, and Arun Nataraja giving spiritual adventures. And Robin Stone has helped with building security and helping behind the scenes in many other ways. And we also have Rich Miller, who brought in some lighting so we could be seen better. And all of you, thank you for this Sunday. And to you two, sitting at home, sipping your coffee.
Who's writing comments? Hi, everybody. I see Melissa. I see Marilyn. I see Carol. I see Sandra. Hi, everybody. Also, Derek and I got engaged. Ah, okay, bye.
Big news to end the live stream.
There we go.
Bye-bye.
Dead on a high note.